The massive ship appeared in Earth's solar system without warning, its crystalline hull gleaming like a dark jewel against the star field. Admiral Vorthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, his towering crystal form reflecting the dim light from dozens of control panels. His species, the Kithara, had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They had conquered 200 worlds and absorbed 47 different species into their empire. This small blue planet would be number 201. "Initial scans complete, Admiral," reported his aide, a smaller Kithara whose crystals pulsed with nervous energy. "The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have achieved basic space travel, but remain confined to their home system. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level is primitive by our standards." Vorthak examined the data flowing across his command screen. The humans had small ships, basic weapons, and simple communication systems. Their largest settlements were concentrated on a single world. It would be like all the others, a show of force, immediate surrender, and integration into the empire as laborers. The Kithara needed workers for their vast mining operations, and these humans would serve adequately once properly trained. "Send the standard first contact message," Vorthok ordered. "Inform them that they will receive the honor of joining the galactic hegemony. Prepare the demonstration fleet." 3 hours later, a small human vessel approached the Kithara flagship. The ship was crude, built from metal alloys and chemical propulsion systems that the Kithara had abandoned centuries ago. It docked with the flagship using mechanical clamps rather than energy fields. Vorthok found their primitive technology almost amusing. The human delegation consisted of 5 individuals led by someone who identified himself as Captain Davies. They wore simple uniforms and carried no visible weapons. As they entered the reception chamber, Vorthok noted their compact builds and the way they moved. Most species that met the Kithara for the first time showed immediate signs of fear or awe. These humans seemed calm, almost relaxed. "Welcome to my ship," Vorthok said, his voice resonating through the chamber's translation system. "I am Admiral Vorthok of the Kithara Empire. You have the privilege of witnessing the might of the galactic hegemony." Captain Davies nodded politely. "Thank you for receiving us, Admiral. I'm Captain Davies, representing Earth's United Governments. We're honored to make first contact with your people." The formal words were correct, but something in the human's tone puzzled Vorthok. There was no tremor of fear, no submission in his posture. The other humans stood quietly behind their leader, observing everything with what seemed like professional interest rather than terror. "Your planet will become part of our empire," Vorthok continued, activating a holographic display that showed the vast extent of Kithara territory. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds serve the hegemony. Your species will find purpose as workers in our industrial complexes. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary. Devi studied the star map for a long moment. "That's an impressive empire, Admiral. You've clearly achieved great things. However, Earth's governments have sent me to discuss the terms of a possible alliance rather than subjugation." The word alliance struck Vorthok like a physical blow. In 3 millennia of expansion, no primitive species had ever suggested an alliance. They either submitted immediately or were crushed. The concept of equals negotiating was so foreign that Vorthok needed several seconds to process it. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding," Vorthok said carefully. "The Kithara do not form alliances with inferior species. We offer the protection and guidance of our empire in exchange for service." "This is not negotiable. I understand your position," Davies replied. "But we'd like to propose a different arrangement. Earth has resources and capabilities that might benefit both our peoples. Perhaps we could discuss mutual cooperation instead of conquest." One of the other humans, a woman the translator identified as Lieutenant Ross, stepped forward slightly. "Admiral, we're curious about your empire. How do you maintain control over so many different worlds and species?" The question seemed innocent enough, but something about it bothered Vorthok. There was an analytical quality to the way she asked it, as if she were gathering intelligence rather than making conversation. Superior technology and military might, Vorthok answered. The Kithara have evolved beyond the limitations that bind. Lesser species, our weapons can shatter planets. Our ships can cross the galaxy in days. No species can match our capabilities. Davies nodded again. Impressive. We'd like to learn more about your technology and culture. Earth scientists and diplomats would be very interested in establishing formal relations. Formal relations will consist of your complete surrender, Vorthok said, his patience beginning to wear thin. I will give you 72 hours to consult with your leaders. When we next meet, you will present your planet's unconditional submission to the hegemony. We'll certainly convey your message to our governments, Davies said. In the meantime, would it be possible for some of our people to remain here as cultural liaisons? We're genuinely interested in learning about Kithara society. Vorthok considered the request. Having human hostages might ensure their cooperation, and observing these primitive beings at close range could provide useful information for the coming occupation. Very well. 2 of your people may remain. The rest will return to your world with our terms. Davies selected Lieutenant Ross and another human called Dr. Morgan to stay behind. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Vorthok noticed something that struck him as odd. The humans showed no signs of the despair or panic that usually followed first contact ultimatums. If anything, they seemed more alert and focused than. When they had arrived after the human ship departed, Vorthok ordered his science teams to begin detailed scans of Earth. He wanted complete information about human military capabilities, population centers, and industrial capacity. The conquest would begin in exactly 72 hours. Lieutenant Ross and Dr. Morgan were assigned quarters in the diplomatic section of the ship. As they settled in, Ross struck up conversations with the Kithara crew members assigned to monitor them. She seemed genuinely curious about their culture, asking questions about their homeworlds, their history, and their methods of warfare. Her friendly manner and obvious intelligence made her popular with the younger Kithara, who were eager to share stories about their empire's great victories. Dr. Morgan spent his time studying the ship's systems and technology, always with Kithara supervision. He asked detailed questions about their engineering, their power sources, and their manufacturing techniques. To the Kithara observers, he seemed like a primitive scientist trying to understand advanced technology far beyond his comprehension. What neither the admiral nor his crew understood was that both humans were conducting a thorough intelligence-gathering operation. They were learning everything they could about Kithara capabilities, weaknesses, and psychology. Every casual question was designed to extract specific information. Every friendly conversation was mapping the command structure and tactical doctrine. Of their potential enemies, the 72-hour countdown had begun, but the Kithara had no idea that they were facing something they had never encountered before, a species that had evolved on a world so hostile that warfare and survival were the same thing. Lieutenant Ross sat in the ship's recreation area, sharing a meal with Quill, a young Kithara technician who seemed fascinated by the strange aliens aboard their vessel. The crystalline being's form shifted colors as he spoke, a sign Ross had learned indicated excitement and curiosity. "Tell me about your world," Quill said, his translated voice carrying an eager tone. "Our scans show such unusual conditions. How do your people survive in such an environment?" Ross smiled and took a bite of the nutrient paste the Kithara had provided. It tasted awful, but she had eaten worse things during survival training. "What do you mean by unusual?" "The gravity is so intense," Quill explained, his crystals pulsing with amazement. "Our homeworld has gravity that is barely half of what your planet generates. Most of our worlds are carefully selected for comfortable living conditions. We avoid places that are too harsh." "What's the strongest gravity your people can handle?" Ross asked, genuinely curious. Quill's form dimmed slightly. "Perhaps 2/3 of your world's pull, and only for short periods. Anything stronger would crush our crystal matrix. But your people live their entire lives under such pressure. Your bones must be incredibly dense." Ross had never thought of Earth's gravity as particularly heavy. To her, it was just normal. What about the atmosphere? Do you find it difficult to breathe here? The oxygen concentration is terrifying, Quill admitted. We have to wear protective filters when we visit your quarters. That gas is so reactive it would burn through our respiratory systems in minutes. Our worlds have carefully balanced atmospheric mixtures with minimal oxygen. How do you not constantly catch fire? The question puzzled Ross until she realized the fundamental difference between their species. The Kithara had evolved in stable, controlled environments. They chose worlds that were safe and comfortable. Humans had been forged by a planet that was actively trying to kill them every single day. Tell me about Kithara worlds, Ross said. What are they like? Quill's crystals brightened with pride. Beautiful and perfect. Low gravity, calm weather, peaceful skies. No dangerous animals or plants? We eliminated all threats centuries ago. When we first developed technology, our cities are climate-controlled and protected from any natural disasters. No dangerous animals at all? Ross asked. Of course not. Why would anyone choose to live alongside creatures that could harm them? The first thing any intelligent species does is remove such threats from their environment. Ross thought about Earth's ecosystem. Lions, bears, sharks, venomous snakes, disease-carrying insects, poisonous plants, extreme weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, and thousands of other things that could kill a human on any given day. Her people had not eliminated these threats because they could not. Instead, they had learned to live with them, fight them, and eventually master them. How do your people handle conflict? Ross asked. Wars, disputes, that sort of thing? Quill's form shifted to a confused pattern. War? Between Kithara? That hasn't happened in over 1,000 years. We settled such primitive behavior when we became civilized. Disputes are handled through logical discussion and resource allocation. Why would intelligent beings fight each other when they could work together? But your empire conquers other worlds, Ross pointed out. That's different, Quill explained. We bring order and peace to chaotic systems. Most species are grateful for our guidance. They're usually fighting among themselves when we arrive. We stop their wars and give them productive work to do. Ross was beginning to understand something crucial about the Kithara. They were not warriors in any sense humans would recognize. They were more like gardeners, tidying up the galaxy and removing anything messy or dangerous. They conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force, but they had no real understanding of warfare as a craft or art. Meanwhile, Dr. Morgan was conducting his own investigation in the ship's engineering sections. The Kithara engineer, assigned to supervise him, Nexer, was proudly showing off their advanced systems. This is our primary power core, Nexer explained, gesturing to a massive crystal formation that hummed with energy. It draws power directly from subspace fluctuations. Very efficient and clean. Morgan studied the setup with professional interest. How do you maintain it during combat? What happens if it gets damaged? Nexer's form flickered with confusion. Damaged? How would it become damaged? Our ships are heavily shielded. Enemy weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. But what if they did? Morgan pressed. What's your backup power system? We have redundant cores, of course, but they've never been needed. Our shields have never failed in combat. Morgan nodded, but internally he was amazed. The Kithara had built their entire military doctrine around the assumption that their technology was so superior that they would never face a real threat. They had backup systems, but they had never actually tested them under combat conditions. How do your ground forces operate? Morgan asked. Do you have mobile command posts, field repair capabilities, that sort of thing? Our ground forces are primarily for occupation and crowd control, Nexer replied. We rarely need to deploy them since most species surrender after our initial demonstration. When we do use them, they operate from secure bases with full logistical support. Morgan was starting to see a pattern. The Kithara military was designed for intimidation and occupation, not for fighting a determined enemy. They had never faced a species that could match their technology or challenge their tactics back on Earth. The response to the Kithara ultimatum was being debated in emergency sessions around the globe. The alien demand for surrender had been transmitted to every major government, along with detailed recordings of the first contact meeting. President Chun stood before the United Nations Security Council, her face grim but determined. The intelligence our people have gathered confirms our worst fears. The Kithara have overwhelming technological superiority. Their ships are more advanced than anything we can build. Their weapons could devastate our cities. General Martinez nodded in agreement. Our preliminary analysis suggests that a direct confrontation would be suicidal. They have 3,000 years of technological advancement on us. However, Chun continued, our agents have also discovered something interesting. The Kithara have never faced a species like us. They've conquered peaceful civilizations and primitive worlds. They've never fought a war against an entire planet of soldiers. The British Prime Minister leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean? Every human on Earth has been shaped by evolution on a death world, Chun explained. We're persistence hunters, pack animals, tool users. We've spent our entire history fighting for survival against impossible odds. The Kithara think they're dealing with another peaceful species that will surrender when faced with superior force. The Russian representative spoke up. Are you suggesting we fight them? I'm suggesting we show them what humans really are, Chun replied. We've been preparing for this possibility since we first achieved spaceflight. Not for invasion, but for the day we met something bigger and stronger than us. The vote was unanimous. Earth's response would be delivered in 12 hours, a polite but firm rejection of the Kithara ultimatum, accompanied by a counter-proposal for peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. Admiral Vorthak received the message while reviewing invasion plans. He read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. In his entire career, no species had ever rejected Kithara demands. They either submitted immediately or were crushed within days. They must not understand our power, he told his staff. Prepare a demonstration? Destroy one of their orbital stations. That should clarify the situation. But as he gave the order, a nagging doubt began to form in his mind. The humans had seemed too calm, too confident. They acted like they knew something he did not. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vorthak wondered if he had underestimated his enemy. Admiral Vorthak stood in the center of the ship's combat arena, his crystalline form radiating frustrated energy. The humans had not responded to his demonstration as expected. When he destroyed their orbital research station, they had simply evacuated the personnel and sent a message expressing regret for the loss of scientific equipment. No panic, no desperate pleas for mercy, just a clinical assessment of the damage and a request for compensation. These humans puzzle me, Vorthak admitted to his senior staff. They show no proper fear. Perhaps they require a more personal demonstration of our superiority. Commander Thex, his military advisor, flickered with agreement. The traditional trial of champions would serve our purposes. Let them send their finest warrior to face one of ours. When we crush their champion before their eyes, they will understand the futility of resistance. Vorthak approved the plan immediately. The trial of champions was an ancient Kithara tradition used to demonstrate superiority over primitive species. It had never failed to break enemy morale. He sent the challenge to Earth's representatives, confident that the coming victory would end this frustrating situation. The human response arrived within hours. They accepted the challenge and would send their champion to the Kithara flagship. When the shuttle docked, Vorthak expected to see some massive warrior in advanced armor, perhaps their equivalent of a Kithara battle champion. Instead, they sent Marcus Reed, a man of average height and build who introduced himself as a former soldier turned engineer. He wore simple clothing and carried no weapons or armor. The Kithara delegation exchanged confused looks as Reed calmly examined the arena where the combat would take place. "This is your champion?" Vorthak asked, unable to hide his bewilderment. "I volunteered," Reed replied simply. "I figured I could handle it," Lieutenant Ross, still serving as cultural liaison, approached Reed with what appeared to be concern. "Marcus, are you sure about this? Their champion is supposed to be nearly 3 meters tall and armed with energy weapons." Reed shrugged. "I've faced worse odds. Remember the training exercise in Alaska? This should be easier than that." Vorthak didn't understand the reference, but Ross's apparent worry pleased him. At least one human recognized the hopelessness of their situation. The Kithara champion Zephan entered the arena to impress murmurs from the alien observers. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, his crystal body reinforced with combat enhancements that made him look like a living weapon. His armor was integrated into his form, providing both protection and tactical systems. Energy weapons extended from his arms like natural appendages. Reed watched Zephan's entrance with professional interest, noting the champion's movement patterns and the way his equipment was distributed. When the combat began, Reed did something no Kithara had ever seen in trial combat. He ran away. Zephan pursued, firing energy bolts that carved chunks from the arena walls. Reed dodged and weaved, using the chamber's support pillars and maintenance platforms as cover. The Kithara observers began to relax, assuming their champion would end this quickly once he cornered the fleeing human, but Reed wasn't fleeing randomly. He was mapping the arena, learning the terrain, and forcing Zephan to waste energy on missed shots. When the alien champion's weapons began to cycle more slowly, indicating power drain, Reed changed tactics. Instead of running, Reed began to stalk his opponent. He used the arena's vertical spaces, climbing maintenance ladders and moving along overhead catwalks. Zephan's heavy form and energy weapons were designed for direct confrontation, not for tracking a mobile target through complex terrain. Reed dropped from above, landing on Zephan's back and immediately targeting the connection points between the champion's armor and body. He carried no weapons, but his hands moved with surgical precision, finding weak spots and applying pressure in ways that disrupted Zephan's systems, the crystal being thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge his attacker, but Reed clung to him like a parasite. Every movement Zephan made was analyzed and countered. When the alien champion tried to slam Reed against the wall, the human used the impact to lever himself into a better position. The watching Kithara began to show signs of distress. This wasn't how trial combat was supposed to work. Their champion should have ended the fight in minutes with overwhelming firepower. Instead, he was being systematically dismantled by a primitive being using nothing but physical skill and tactical thinking. Zephan's energy weapons were useless at close range. His armor, designed to deflect ranged attacks, actually hindered his movement in close combat. Reed exploited every limitation, every design flaw, every assumption the Kithara had made about how combat should work. The end came suddenly. Reed found the neural interface that connected Zephan's consciousness to his combat systems and applied pressure in a way that sent feedback through the alien's entire body. Zephan collapsed. His systems overloaded and his crystal matrix fractured from the neural shock. Reed stood over his fallen opponent, breathing normally and showing no signs of exhaustion. To him, the fight had been a light workout, comparable to a routine training exercise. To the Kithara observers, it was impossible. "How?" Admiral Vorthak demanded. "Zephan is our greatest warrior. His armor is impenetrable. His weapons can level buildings." Reed looked up at the observation deck where the alien command staff stood in shock. "Your champion was built for the kind of warfare your people understand. Stand far away, shoot big guns, rely on superior technology. That works fine against enemies who fight the same way." He gestured to the unconscious Zephan. "But I'm not fighting your kind of war. I'm fighting the way my people learned to fight over millions of years. We're persistence hunters. We don't try to overpower our prey. We wear it down, exploit its weaknesses, and wait for it to make a mistake." Dr. Morgan, watching from the human section, nodded in understanding. Marcus learned to fight on a world where everything is trying to kill you. Bears, wolves, other humans, the environment itself. He's been training for this kind of combat his entire life without knowing it. Quill, the young Kithara technician, stared at the fallen champion with growing horror. But Zephan had every advantage. Superior size, armor, weapons, how could a primitive being defeat him? Lieutenant Ross answered quietly. Because your people have forgotten what real predators look like. You've been conquering prey animals for so long that you've never faced a hunter? Admiral Vorthak left the arena in stunned silence, his entire worldview shaken. The trial combat was supposed to demonstrate Cathara superiority and break human morale. Instead, it had revealed something terrifying. These humans were not another peaceful species to be absorbed into the Empire. They were something the Cathara had never encountered before. As medical teams tended to Zephin, Reed was escorted back to his shuttle. He paused at the airlock and looked back at his escorts. You might want to tell your admiral something, he said casually. I'm not even a soldier anymore. I fix machines for a living. If he wants to see what our actual warriors can do, he's welcome to try. The shuttle departed, leaving the Cathara to contemplate the impossible. Their greatest champion had been defeated by what the humans considered a civilian. News of the combat spread through the fleet within hours, and with it came the first whispers of doubt about the coming invasion. For 3,000 years, the Cathara had been the apex predators of the galaxy. Now they were beginning to suspect that they had finally encountered something higher on the food chain. Admiral Vorthak stood on his command bridge, watching as his invasion fleet moved into position around Earth. 200 warships surrounded the small blue planet, their weapons charged and ready. Despite the disturbing outcome of the trial combat, he remained confident that superior numbers and technology would prevail. The humans might be more dangerous than expected, but they were still primitive. Begin orbital bombardment, Vorthak ordered. Target their major population centers and military installations. Standard conquest protocol. Energy beams lanced down from the Cathara fleet, striking cities around the globe. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers as government buildings. Military bases and communication centers were destroyed. The bombardment continued for 6 hours, reducing Earth's visible infrastructure to smoking ruins. Bombardment complete, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. All major targets have been neutralized. Surface resistance should be minimal, Vorthak nodded with satisfaction. This was how conquests were supposed to proceed: overwhelming force, immediate destruction of enemy capabilities, and swift victory. The humans would surrender now that they had seen what Cathara power could accomplish, but the surrender message never came. Instead, his communication officers began reporting strange signals from the planet's surface, radio transmissions that seemed to originate from underground facilities, encrypted data bursts that suggested a hidden communication network. Most disturbing of all, military units that were still active despite the bombardment. Impossible, Vorthak muttered. We destroyed their command structures. How can they still be coordinating resistance? Lieutenant Ross, still aboard the flagship as a cultural liaison, overheard the Admiral's confusion. She exchanged a meaningful look with Dr. Morgan before addressing the alien commander. Admiral, perhaps you misunderstood how human governments work. We don't keep all our important facilities in obvious places. We learned a long time ago to prepare for the worst. Vorthak turned his attention to the human woman. Explain. We call it distributed command structure, Ross said. Every major city has backup facilities hidden underground or in remote locations. Every military unit has redundant communication systems. We've been planning for global conflict since before we reached space. Dr. Morgan nodded in agreement. Your people evolved on peaceful worlds and conquered species that fought traditional wars. You expect enemies to have obvious targets that can be destroyed from orbit. But humans learned warfare on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We got very good at surviving when everything seemed hopeless. Before Vorthak could respond, his tactical officer called for his attention. Admiral, we're detecting human ground forces moving toward our landing zones. They appear to be well organized and heavily armed. Deploy our occupation forces, Vorthak ordered. Show these humans the futility of resistance. The first Cathara landing force touched down near the ruins of Beijing, expecting to find scattered survivors hiding in the wreckage. Instead, they encountered Captain Liu and her defense battalion, who had been waiting in concealed positions for exactly this moment. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Cathara military history. The Crystal Warriors advanced in formation, their energy weapons sweeping the area for targets. They found nothing but empty ruins and smoking debris. Then the humans struck. Liu's forces didn't attack directly. They used the destroyed cityscape as cover, launching hit-and-run strikes against isolated Cathara units. They employed weapons the aliens had never seen: kinetic projectiles, explosive devices, chemical irritants that interfered with Cathara sensor systems. But more than the weapons, it was the tactics that baffled the invaders. The humans fought like they were hunting dangerous animals. They worked in coordinated groups, communicating through signals the Cathara couldn't intercept. They used terrain to their advantage, turning every building and street into a potential ambush site. When Cathara reinforcements arrived, they found their advance units scattered and demoralized. The humans had vanished back into the ruins, leaving behind damaged equipment and confused reports of enemies who fought without honor or proper military doctrine. "They don't stand and fight," complained Commander Thex over the tactical network. "They strike and disappear like insects. How are we supposed to defeat an enemy that won't engage in proper combat?" Similar reports came from landing sites around the globe. Human resistance was not collapsing as expected. Instead, it was adapting, learning from each encounter, and becoming more effective. Worse, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. In the Australian outback, Major Anderson led a company of soldiers in what he privately called the best training exercise ever. His men used the harsh environment to their advantage, forcing Cathara forces to pursue them into terrain that was hostile to crystal-based life forms. The aliens' advanced technology meant nothing when they were dying of heat exhaustion in a desert that humans found merely uncomfortable. In the mountains of Afghanistan, Colonel Peterson's special forces turned the rocky terrain into a death trap for Cathara patrols. The aliens' energy weapons were powerful but required line of sight targeting. In terrain where an enemy could disappear behind any rock or ridge, superior firepower became irrelevant. The turning point came when Admiral Vorthak received a message that shattered his assumptions about the conflict. His long-range sensors had detected ships approaching from the outer system. Human ships, but not the primitive vessels he had seen during first contact. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we're reading 47 human vessels approaching from multiple vectors. These ships are not consistent with their previous technology levels." Vorthak studied the tactical display with growing dread. The approaching human fleet showed signs of advanced propulsion, sophisticated weapon systems, and military-grade armor. These were not the crude vessels of a primitive species, but the warships of a spacefaring civilization. Captain Davies's voice crackled over the communication system, his tone calm and professional. "Admiral Vorthak, this is the Earth Defense Fleet. We're prepared to discuss terms for your immediate withdrawal from our system." "Impossible," Vorthak responded. "Your species has barely achieved spaceflight. These vessels exceed your technological capabilities." Davies laughed, and the sound sent chills through every Cathara on the bridge. "Admiral, you made the same mistake that predators have been making on Earth for millions of years. You assumed that what you could see was all there was." The human fleet moved into attack formation with precision that spoke of years of training and preparation. Vorthak realized with growing horror that the humans had been ready for this day long before first contact occurred. "You see, Admiral," Davies continued, "we've been expanding into space for decades. Not just to our neighboring planets, but to systems you've never bothered to explore. We chose worlds your people would consider uninhabitable. Places with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures. Death worlds that only we could colonize." Dr. Morgan, still on the flagship, provided additional details with clinical precision. "We've been building our fleet and training our forces for exactly this scenario. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew that someday we'd meet something bigger and stronger than us. We've been preparing to fight the galaxy's apex predators since we first looked at the stars. Admiral Vorthak stared at the tactical display as more human ships appeared on his sensors. His fleet was outnumbered, surrounded, and facing an enemy that had been planning this encounter for generations. For the first time in his career, the Supreme Commander of the Kithara military forces realized that he was not the hunter in this situation. He was the prey. The space around Earth became a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Admiral Vorthak's invasion fleet, designed to overwhelm primitive opponents through superior technology, found itself facing an enemy that fought by completely different rules. Captain Davies commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the battleship Terra, a vessel built in the asteroid belt shipyards that the Kithara had never detected. His tactical display showed the positions of both fleets, and he smiled grimly at what he saw. "All ships implement Hunter Protocol," Davies ordered. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them, we're trying to teach them." The human ships moved, like a pack of wolves surrounding a larger predator. They didn't engage in the direct confrontations that Kithara doctrine expected. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking at isolated vessels and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Commander Torres led a squadron of fast-attack ships in a series of precision strikes against Kithara supply vessels. Her ships were smaller and less heavily armed than the alien warships, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They darted in, crippled their targets, and vanished before the enemy could respond. "This is not proper fleet combat," Admiral Vorthak complained to his staff. "They refuse to engage in honorable battle. How can we demonstrate our superiority if they won't stand and fight?" Lieutenant Ross, still serving as an unwilling observer, answered from her position near the command station. "Admiral, you're still thinking like a Kithara. You expect your enemies to fight the way you fight. But humans learned warfare from predators that don't care about honor or proper tactics. We care about winning." The human fleet demonstrated this philosophy with ruthless efficiency. They targeted Kithara ships with captured alien technology that had been reverse-engineered and improved. They used the aliens' own weapons against them, but with modifications that the Kithara designers had never considered. More disturbing to the alien command was the way human crews operated. When Kithara vessels were damaged, their crews became confused and demoralized. When human ships took damage, their crews adapted and found new ways to fight. A human destroyer with half its weapons destroyed continued fighting by ramming enemy vessels. A cruiser with a damaged engine used its remaining power to overload its shields and function as a mobile mine. The turning point came when Commander Torres led a boarding action against Admiral Vorthak's flagship. Her assault team used captured Kithara technology to breach the ship's hull, but once inside, they fought with weapons and tactics the aliens had never seen. The Kithara crew expected traditional ship-to-ship combat, energy weapons in corridors, formal advances on strategic positions, proper military protocol. Instead, they faced humans who moved through their own ship like they owned it. Torres's team split into small groups that used the ship's ventilation systems, maintenance tunnels, and even cargo bays to move around. They disabled life support systems, sabotaged power relays, and generally turned the Kithara vessel against its own crew. When Crystal Warriors tried to pursue them, the humans used the ship's low-gravity environment to their advantage, moving in 3 dimensions while their enemies remained trapped in 2-dimensional thinking. "They're in the walls," reported a panicked Kithara officer. "They're using our own ship against us. How is this possible?" Dr. Morgan, watching the invasion from the bridge, provided a clinical explanation. "Your people design ships for comfort and efficiency. Our people design ships to be fought in. Every human vessel has multiple redundant systems, defensive positions, and emergency protocols. We've been studying your ship's layout since we came aboard. We know it better than you do." The boarding action ended when Torres's team reached the bridge. They didn't kill the command crew or destroy the ship's systems. Instead, they systematically disabled every weapon and defensive system while keeping the crew alive and unharmed. "Admiral Vorthak," Torres said as she stood in the center of his command bridge, I'm Commander Torres of the Earth Defense Force. I'm placing you and your crew under protective custody. Vorthak stared at the human woman in bewilderment. Protective custody? We are your enemies. Why haven't you killed us? Because we're not monsters, Torres replied. We're predators, but we're intelligent predators. We kill when we have to, but we prefer to avoid unnecessary death. Around the fleet, similar. Scenes were playing out on dozens of Cathara vessels. Human boarding parties had captured ship after ship, not through overwhelming force, but through superior tactics and intimate knowledge of their enemies' weaknesses. The Cathara military doctrine had no provisions for this kind of defeat. They had never faced an enemy that could turn their own advantages against them. Their superior technology was being used by human crews who understood it better than its designers. Their powerful ships were being operated by beings who treated them as tools rather than symbols of dominance. Young Quill, the technician who had befriended Lieutenant Ross, found himself face to face with a human soldier in the ship's engineering section. He expected to be killed or captured, but the human simply handed him a data pad. "Read this," the soldier said. "It's important." The data pad contained a comprehensive analysis of human psychology, biology, and military capabilities. As Quill read, his crystalline form began to pulse with horror and understanding. Humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were the product of millions of years of evolution on a world that had tried to kill them every single day. They had learned to survive against impossible odds, to adapt to any environment, and to turn any situation to their advantage. More than that, they had learned to work together. The data showed that human military units functioned as extensions of a single organism, each individual trained to support the others in ways that maximized the group's effectiveness. They were not just predators, they were pack hunters on a galactic scale. Quill found Lieutenant Ross in the aftermath of the battle and showed her the data pad. "Is this true? Are all humans like this?" Ross nodded solemnly. "Every human child learns basic survival skills. Every adult knows how to fight if necessary. We don't have a military class or a civilian class. We have humans who specialize in different kinds of problem solving." "But why?" Quill asked. "Why did your people develop this way?" "Because our planet gave us no choice," Ross explained. "Earth is beautiful, but it's also deadly. Everything on our world evolved to survive against everything else. We learned to be the best at it, or we would have gone extinct." Admiral Vorthak was brought before Captain Davies aboard the human flagship. The Cathara commander expected execution or torture, but instead found himself offered a chair and a cup of tea. "Admiral," Davies said calmly, "we need to discuss the future of Cathara-human relations." "You have one," Vorthak replied bitterly. "Name your terms for our surrender." Davies shook his head. "We don't want your surrender. We want your understanding. Your empire has conquered hundreds of worlds because you've never faced real opposition. But the galaxy is bigger than both our species. There are threats out there that neither of us can handle alone." The human captain activated a holographic display showing the galactic map with the territories of both species marked. "Your people are gardeners, Admiral. You're very good at creating order and managing resources. Our people are hunters. We're very good at finding problems and solving them permanently." Vorthak studied the display with growing comprehension. "You're proposing an alliance." "I'm proposing a partnership," Davies corrected. "Your empire provides structure and stability. Our forces provide security and defense. Together, we might actually make this galaxy a safer place for everyone." The negotiations that followed lasted for weeks, but the outcome was inevitable. The Cathara had learned that they were not the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. The humans had learned that there were other ways to organize a galactic civilization besides constant warfare. The Treaty of Terra established the first truly cooperative interstellar government in galactic history. The Cathara provided technological advancement and administrative expertise. The humans provided military protection and frontier exploration, but the most important clause in the treaty was the one that established joint research programs. Human scientists working with Cathara researchers began to unlock secrets of the universe that neither species could have discovered alone. As Admiral Vorthak prepared to return to Cathara space to explain the new arrangement to his government, he asked Davies one final question. How long had your people been preparing for this encounter? Davies smiled. Admiral, we've been preparing for this encounter since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what else might be out there. We knew that someday we'd meet something bigger and stronger than us. We just wanted to be ready when it happened. The Cathara fleet departed Earth system not as conquerors but as partners in a new kind of galactic civilization. Behind them, they left a species that had just announced to the universe that the apex predators had finally met their match. The galaxy would never be the same.